Welcome to the digital living room. Get comfortable, take your shoes off, take your feet and drag them against my plush carpets because I love plush carpets. Get a seat on my plush couch, grab a drink, let's chat. All right, I want us to get to the juice for the day, but first of all, I'm going to remind us why we are here. This is Dear Nigerians, and Dear Nigerians is a podcast that is dedicated to millennials and Gen Z with a Nigerian influence perspective and a Nigerian influence background or Nigerian influence identity. I welcome you all here. We're going to have a chat, and as is the theme of this podcast, we're going to talk about something today that really, first of all, highlights where we're coming from as a people, what we've been handed down from our ancestors, and how we are living it out now in 2024 and beyond, and what we might need to change. All right, let's get to the juice. Today's episode. Dear Nigerians, are we Halloweeners? I don't know if Halloweeners is a word, but that's my word for this episode. As I'm recording this, we are just a few days from Halloween here in the US, but Halloween is also celebrated in other countries. I know for sure it's celebrated in Europe, which is where it came from, and also South America. And as I am researching for this episode, even in some pockets in Nigeria, people are catching the global tune and doing things there. I was going to actually record something else and post this episode. This episode is coming out on the day before Halloween, and I had another thing planned entirely, but then I thought about it, right? Actually, I'm not going to walk away from this. Halloween, this is such an opportunity and a conversation to have because the things that come up from Halloween, the trick-or-treating, the ghost stories, the dressing up that we've seen as witches and wizards and all of that. This Halloween topic can be a very polarizing conversation amongst Nigerians because of what we know has been in our ancestries. And for those of you who might be listening and are still trying to figure out what is she talking about, we'll get there in a minute, okay? But Halloween in America, Halloween in the West, but largely in America, is so pervasive into the culture. It's a normal celebration, a normal, even some people say holiday, and so woven deeply into the culture. Now you might say, what about masquerades and all the juju and all the egungun that we see on the street? I get it, right? But even when there's masqueraders in Nigeria, I remember that there was such an air of fear, like an air of fear whenever we saw them because they were so mean and, you know, I look at them with different eyes now. Like as a creative, a mature creative, I look at them with the eyes of, oh, look at the outfits. They're pretty pictures, right? But obviously being aware of what those things channel. But only in America would you see someone physically channeling a witch in public and everyone's just like, it's okay, it's nothing. In fact, I had an experience last year. I was taking my daughter, she was 2.5 at the time, to a baby music class, and it was like a mommy and me music class. And I remember as we got into the building, like right at the door, there was a young family and their little daughter was playing around and running around by the exit. And I could hear her, like I opened the door to the building, we entered, and the first thing I see is this little girl saying to me, I'm a witch, I'm a witch, I'm a witch. And she's just saying it. I'm a witch. I'm a witch. And you can see her moving her hands and pretending she's riding on a broom and saying, I'm a witch. I'm a witch. Like, that's also only in America. Her parents were right beside her, hearing what she was saying and not really minding her, right? For them, it's just, oh, she's playing. But as someone with a Nigerian influence identity, if my child is saying that to me, because of the things I've been exposed to in my background, um, okay, we got to stop this. We got to have some conversation. But in America, it's completely different. So let's talk about Halloween, guys. Let's talk about how this thing is perceived or can be perceived because of our ancestries and the things that have been passed down to us, regardless of the tribes that we come from. Let's talk about that. And let's talk about what we're doing with it now. Let's get on to the mind mingle. I went on my trusted channels for hearing from Nigerians on different topics, and I simply asked the question, Nigerians abroad, what are you doing with Halloween? Now, what I want to do is share the thread of conversations that this question inspired across the world from different Nigerians. And this is unfiltered conversations. Here we go. First response: I give out candy. I'm mature enough to understand the difference between fiction and reality. I really don't celebrate any holidays or care about them. But hey, if someone celebrates, there's no reason to ruin it for them. And then someone responded and said, eh? Even Nigerians are celebrating this satanic ritual now? Other response: nope, me and my son will not be participating. All right, here's another thread of conversations. It started with this. Someone says, I wanted to participate, but I can't because of parents. Someone were asked in response, well, what are your parents' sentiments? And this person says, well, my parents are very Christian, so they think Halloween is demonic. A new responder says, well, that's unfortunate. The pagan traditions of Halloween were meant to scare away demons and bad spirits. A new response: actually, Halloween is the most sacred day for witches. There's a coven not far from where I live, and they are busy right now, but they don't dress up or any of that nonsense. New response: I'll be chilling at a friend's place. My roommate will be the one to deal with trick-or-treaters. A new thread: if Halloween is of the devil. Someone responds to that and says, and yet Nigeria is the capital of juju and using jazz to attack your friends and family. Common sense should allow you to discern between fictional fun and reality. New response: in the UK, most Nigerians I know do nothing at all. The kids might get roped into doing crap at school, but outside of school, nothing, and certainly not going to beg for sweets. We leave that to the white kids. All right, I left that as unfiltered as possible, and I think in those responses, if you are not of the Nigerian background, if you have not interacted with Nigerian individuals or cultures in any sense, I think from those responses, you get a sense of where we're coming from. You get a sense of what conversations Halloween inspires and what feelings Halloween inspires. All right. Now, here's my response, and this is really based on my personal history. I am a Nigerian, a sure thing. I am American and naturalized. I also came up in a Pentecostal home, okay? So, moving to America, Halloween was actually one of the most interesting things to navigate as a family. Not in the sense that we were divided on what to do with it. No, we were very clear on how we were going to do with it, and I'll share that in a little bit. But it was interesting. We came to the US and immediately got plugged into a church family, and that church family was largely Nigerian. And so you would hear all kinds of perspectives from people who had come to the US before us and how they were treating Halloween. You know, the dressing up, don't even wear their outfits, they are passing candy out. That's how they initiate people who don't even do it, you know. So for me, for my brother, and for many people in our church community that we were part of, Halloween was the day we were staying at home. Like the Nigerian parents, mine included, that we were plugged into at that time, opted we're not taking our kids to school in those days. And it's not even just coming from a Christian perspective, though. If you are Nigerian, right, you have seen the influence that anything with a dark theme, which Halloween is, anything with a dark theme, anything that imbibes it, anything that channels it, you've seen those things operate and have real consequences in people's lives, especially the older generation. So for us moving here to the United States, Halloween was not just another holiday, another American experience that we're just going to throw kids into. However, looking at that mind mingle, the perspectives being shared in response to my question, Nigerians, what are you doing with Halloween? I think we can already see that, at least in this generation anyway, for millennials and Gen Z with a Nigerian influence background, people are already making their own patterns around Halloween. They're already forming their own perspectives. They're questioning things. And to some, it's a joking thing. It's another day, an opportunity for fun. And some still have the perspective. Maybe they don't have the same exact perspective as their parents did, but some still treat it at a distance. I'm an adult and I'm raising kids here in the United States, and I see that Halloween is so intimately woven into the culture. It's so intimately woven. So a few days from now is going to be Halloween. In the past couple of days, right? There are a couple of things that have happened. My daughter went to her gymnastics class and they give stickers after gymnastics class. So she comes to me with a sticker that they've handed her. And what is the sticker? It's of a dead man walking. Halloween. She also went to swimming. After her swim class, she also goes for her stickers. Yeah, stickers are a big thing in America for kids. She also goes for her stickers. And typically on any regular day, her stickers are in this green neon bucket. And you look inside the bucket and there's a sticker of a cat or this or that. First of all, she's looking for the stickers and she actually can't find them because what's in place of the stickers is this orange bag with a monster face on it. So she doesn't even know that that's where her stickers are now, right? And so she's like, "Mommy, where are the stickers?" I'm like, "Well, those are the stickers." And I go to the person at the counter. I'm like, "We'll go with regular stickers, please. Where are those?" And so the person brings her the bucket that she's used to, and she sticks her hand there and gets a sticker there, right? We went to the grocery store and there's all of these Halloween things on like where the teller is. It's so deeply woven. When we moved here to the United States, we just knew, right? We're not going to school on Halloween Day, and you don't interact because we had grown up in our early childhood years in Nigeria. That was all said and done because, quite frankly, where we were coming from, Halloween wasn't a thing. So we didn't feel like we were missing out. But now we're raising our children, and our children who were born here in the United States, they're growing up in a place where no, Halloween is a thing you participate in, and it's a holiday. For some of us millennials and Gen Z with a Nigerian influence background, some of us were born here, or some of us were not even born here, but came here and they're just like, Halloween, I don't care about all that spiritual stuff. It's just a fun day, right? Some of us are like that, but there are some of us, myself included, that because of your history, for for your awareness of things that can happen in Nigeria and awareness of spiritual things as it's imparted to you growing up from Nigeria, because of that, but also because of faith. A lot of Nigerians come up in Christian homes. Also, because of faith, Halloween is not just something that you take and embrace without questioning. For me, I have lots of questions about it. I have lots of even boundaries that I've defined about it. So I was talking to my husband about this week, like, you and me with our kids, we need to define, what do we think about this? What do we believe about this? And what are we communicating to the kids about it? Now, let's start somewhere in terms of answering that question. Let's actually understand, what is Halloween? How did it come to be? Where did it come from? Okay, here we go. This is something that I got from the History Channel. You ready? Halloween's origins date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. The Celts, who lived 2,000 years ago, mostly in the area that is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France, celebrated their new year on November 1. This day marked the end of summer and the harvest and the beginning of a dark, cold winter, a time of the year that was often associated with human death. Celts believed that on the night before the new year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and dead became blurred. On the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, when it was believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to Earth. In addition to causing trouble and damaging crops, Celts thought that the presence of the otherworldly spirits made it easier for the Druids, or Celtic priests, to make predictions about the future. For a people entirely dependent on the volatile natural world, these prophecies were an important source of comfort during the long, dark winter. To commemorate the event, Druids, i.e., the Celtic priests, built huge sacred bonfires where the people gathered to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the Celtic spirits. During the celebration, the Celts wore costumes, typically consisting of animals' heads and skins, and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. When the celebration was over, they relit their hearth fires, which they had extinguished earlier that evening, from the sacred bonfire to help protect them during the winter. By the year after death 43, the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of the Celtic territory. In the course of the 400 years that they ruled the Celtic lands, two festivals of Roman origin were combined with the traditional Celtic celebration of Samhain. The first was Feralia, a day in late October when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead. The second was the day to honor Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit and trees. The symbol of Pomona is the apple, and the incorporation of this celebration into Samhain probably explains the tradition of bobbing for apples that is practiced on Halloween. All right. Then there is All Saints' Day. In May of the year 609 after death, Pope Boniface dedicated the Pantheon in Rome in honor of all Christian martyrs, and the Catholic feast of All Martyrs' Day was established in the Western Church. Pope Gregory III later expanded the festival to include All Saints as well as All Martyrs and moved the observance from May 13 to November 1st. By the ninth century, the influence of Christianity had spread into Celtic lands, where it gradually blended with and supplanted older Celtic rites. In AD 1000, the Church made November 2 All Souls' Day, a day to honor the dead. It's widely believed today that the Church was attempting to replace the Celtic Festival of the Dead with a related church-sanctioned holiday. All Souls' Day was celebrated similarly to Samhain, with big bonfires, parades, and dressing up in costumes as saints, angels, and devils. The All Saint Day celebration was also called All Hallows, and the night before it, the traditional night of Samhain in the Celtic region, began to be called All Hallows Eve and eventually Halloween. Now, how did Halloween start in America, where I live and where I have been exposed to it? In the second half of the 80s, America was flooded with new immigrants. These new immigrants, especially the millions of Irish fleeing the Irish potato famine, helped to popularize the celebration of Halloween nationally. Scottish and Irish immigrants brought Halloween customs to North America in the 19th century, and they spread to the other countries in the late 20th and early 21st century. That is quite a long story of consideration. I'm reading this and understanding the history of Halloween, and I see a couple of things that are so interesting. First, from the Celts, Halloween came from them celebrating the dead. One of the things that really caught me here was that this day marked the end of the November 1st, where they started celebrating this, or the eve of November 1st, where they started celebrating it. It was the day that marked the end of summer and the beginning of cold winter, and that was a time that was often associated with human death. There was a practicality, I guess. The origination of Halloween and celebrating the dead was just based on the fact that at that point in our human lifetime, um, human the way of life for human beings was so deeply intimate with how they could thrive against the elements like the weather. Winter, being a time that gets very cold, is highly associated with human death, and so they have this day that's celebrating people who are dead, which I do think, in terms of if it's honoring people who have lived and honoring their lives, there is a legitimacy to that. What I also see here is the need for survival, because there's this winter season, a winter season that in practicality is so associated with death. Then the cell starts to develop beliefs as far as this is a season, a time where evil spirits come to the land because, well, our crops are damaging. So that must be evil spirits. So in response to what we believe to be the onslaught of evil spirits, let's go ahead and dress ourselves up and appease these deities in a sense. And that's where the costuming that we see now originated from. What's also very interesting is then the colonization, first from the Roman Empire, but then also the influence of the church, the Roman church. So you have the Pope, the representation of spirituality, Christian spirituality in Rome, taking this holiday that appeared pagan to the eyes of the church, and saying, well, let's Christianize it and let's call this thing All Hallows. And then all of these things jumble up, the Celtic things, the Roman pagan things with the goddess Pomona, the church things, they're all jumbled up into this pie that has grown into Halloween. I read this story and I think, well, you know what? All of this stuff, right? Samhain from the Celts and whatever else. It actually comes from the need for survival, a little bit of ignorance, and a little bit of the human tendency to start to fantasize and be suspicious and dramatize things, especially when there's something so serious as death surrounding it. I start to see that and I say, okay, this holiday comes a little bit from all of those things. The tendency for humans to be suspicious, the need to survive, and these human beings thinking, okay, to survive, why don't we dress up and appease the spirits that we believe are coming upon the land? There's that. And then also the need to celebrate. All of this stuff has not been communicated well to people who are here in 2024 celebrating it. That's how I start to look at it, like informing myself. While I am informing myself, I still think, even though there might be a little bit of fantasy creation in the minds of those people who are saying, well, our crops are being destroyed and there's spirits coming upon the land, right? This informs me, but it doesn't necessarily make me check off and say, oh, there's no spiritual association with Halloween. Being someone with a Nigerian influence identity, I've seen too much in my lifetime, heard too much in my own lifetime, and my lifetime has not been very long. I'm in my 30s, right? I've seen too much in my lifetime to know that there is indeed a spiritual world, a spiritual aspect to things. And it's also possible that while these people back then were channeling dark things to appease what they thought to be dark spirits, I believe that it's possible that there were real, true spiritual things that were happening at that time, even though they had turned it into a structured celebration or a structured act to preserve their survival, right? So that's interesting. And I wonder what do my dear Nigerians think about it? How does this understanding of Halloween and its origins, how does it impact the way you see it? Um, for me right now, I love just having a little bit more information. I love seeing it more from the eyes of fact of and what has happened, not just from the culture of suspicion that is typically an African thing. It's not even just Nigerians. The culture of suspicion is typically with Africans, right? It just takes different flavors from tribe to tribe in Africa. In light of what I've said, I want to share the Tailblazer. Now, this Tailblazer is a story I'm telling. It's from my personal life. I've told it in story form, but nothing here is fictional. Everything is fact. Okay? The name of this story is called Initiation. Story, story, story. Once upon a time, time. In my last 2 years of college, I had the opportunity to take elective courses. These were classes you select that were specific to your interest. They didn't have to be for your major. And so, I took the opportunity to travel away from the requirements of my economics major. For my electives, I wanted to lean into my creative side. And if the opportunity existed, I wanted to blend that creative lean with anything that was close to my ancestral roots. It turned out, at the university where I was, there were quite a number of opportunities to do that. In one of my semesters, I enrolled in a class focused on African art history. Our professor was an articulate and well-studied American woman who had spent much time living and researching in Central Africa. It was a wonderful class. With her leadership, we read a book titled King Leopold's Gold and became intimate with how Belgium's invasion of the Congo Free State disrupted the nation's politics, well-being, and even the creation and distribution of its art. Funny enough, that semester that I took that class was the same semester that our university's art museum dedicated space for 3 months to displaying art from around the continent of Africa. So, in addition to discussing in class, we would take excursions to the museum, and our professor would use the art on display at the museum to bring the topics she discussed in class to life. I didn't enroll in this class unaware of the possible personal conflicts that would arise while attending this class. I knew beforehand that much of the art that would be discussed in class were things that could have been stolen by European colonial invaders to Africa. There was also the fact that having lived my very early years in Nigeria, I knew that in many cases, what the Western world called African art were actually conduits of spiritual things. That, I knew, would conflict with the sensitivities of my Christian upbringing. I went out anyway. I enrolled in the class. And on our excursions to the school museum, where the African artworks were displayed, I would stand at a distance when my professor invited my American peers to come and closely study certain figurines that I deemed suspicious. I remember a figurine that my professor had placed in front of us for close study. She, with my American peers, marveled at the ingenuity of the figurine's body shape, its facial expression, the detailed variety in the textures of its skin. Wow, they said. Wow. Cool, they said. I saw ingenuity quite all right. But I also saw on this particular figurine pins and nails that had been inserted into strategic body parts: the head, the chest, the belly, the reproductive organs. These pins had no rhythm or rhyme to create a deliberate design. No, there were multiple pins, some with jagged edges, some with smooth edges, and some body parts had multiple pins inserted around them. I knew immediately that this figurine had been used as a conduit for spiritual attacks against enemies. Cue in my awkward silence and the itching of the scalp as I thought towards my peers. Oh, guys, if only you knew. My professor did know, and in fact, she would often proceed to explain that while the Western world could marvel in awe at these figurines, for Africans, the figurines elicited a series of dramatic actions. For some, she said, they elicited the awe inspired by the interaction with things that are sacred. For some, she said, these figurines elicited disdain, disgust, and avoidance. Once, she explained to my class while I stood at a distance during a class exercise in the museum, there is a reason why Aramide is standing at a distance right now. You see, I knew when signing up for the class that occurrences like these were possible. And so when they happened, I wasn't shocked. What did shock me was what I'm going to tell you next. Oftentimes, our professor would share her own personal experiences in Africa to enrich the conversations in her class. They were riveting. I hadn't spent any time in Central Africa, so I loved to see that region of the continent from her viewpoint. As part of her research, she would enter into communities, villages, and in a bid to learn from them and understand their way of life, she would earn trust with people in the villages and do life with them, just like they did life. In bidding to do her research and doing life with them, she landed at the center of a late night ritual. She had bonded with a group of villagers who had an enigmatic chief, and while I don't remember the events she shared that led to the ritual, I got to understand while she was sharing the story that the ritual itself was for the spiritual empowerment, quote unquote, of the chief. They started chanting and whistling, she said. It was late at night. We were all in a circle, and there was a small burning fire. And then I was hearing drums that were very rhythmic. I was just there to learn this society, but everyone had to participate, she said. At this point, everyone in this art history class was silent, with ears eager to hear more. To my peers, this moment was just like sitting down to hear just another Halloween story. To me, the doors to hell might as well have been opening. My professor continued. At some point, someone brought a chicken they had tied by the legs. Then they cut the head of the chicken off, and they passed around the body of the chicken, and each person took a sip of blood from the chicken. My peers gasped. Did you take a sip? One of them asked. Yes, my professor said. Everyone had to participate. The whole class gasped. Some were stunned to silence in awe. Now, at the point when I was taking this class, I had become a naturalized American citizen. I spoke like an American. I thought like an American in many ways. But as I was hearing this story, the Naija Yoruba girl that still exists in me rose up in my mind's voice and said, Eh? My professor continued. At some point, she said, someone brought out a knife. Me. Eh? My professor. And then they put a cut on their skin and took a bit of blood from their skin. Me. Eh? Professor. I got a cut too. They put a little cut on the back of my neck and took some blood too. Me. Ah, sister, kí ló ṣe sára ẹ? What have you done? I did not expect this story to come from my college African art history class. The class ended with me feeling a deep discomfort, knowing what had happened to my professor in that ritual, with my peers wondering in awe at a world and a life they couldn't even have imagined if they tried. And from that day on, anytime I got a glimpse of the scar on the back of my professor's neck, I remembered her story, and I flinched internally at the thought of the otherworldly things that Scar had cut open in her life. End of story. Guys, this is not an imagined story. This is real life, and real life from a girl, now woman, born in Nigeria, spent early childhood years in Nigeria, moved here to the US, being educated here in the US, and coming across how people in the US perceive African culture. And also, the air of the US is exploring new things and being open to the world. That is something I love about Americans. But as a Nigerian, knowing how much such openness can expose you to things that you don't necessarily want to be exposed to. Oh, oh, what conflicts can arise in a simple conversation with someone, right? So let's have some real convo. I said earlier, understanding the history of Halloween doesn't necessarily lead me to discount the reality of a spiritual world, the reality that it's possible to channel some things in a spiritual world. And as someone who was raised in church, where for church for Nigerians and Africans is high spiritual intensity, in many cases. Like, I know we have a lot to say about if the things we've seen are legitimate, but just speaking about that, having been exposed to churches where Nigerians are prevalent and those churches tend to have high spiritual frequency and high spiritual intensity, I have seen things manifest that for me, I can't discount the existence of a spiritual world. Being a student in that African art history class and listening to that story, because of the history, because of the things I'm aware of, right? In and of itself, that story and that experience that my professor was telling us casually as part of her research just did not sound clean to me. And me, knowing what I know, was extremely uncomfortable. And stuff like that is what informs my own personal view of Halloween. And literally, if you I talk and I share the things that I think about Halloween, some of you might think, nah, that's wrong. And some of you might think that's right. And admittedly, my view is from a spiritual perspective, and especially a Christian spiritual perspective. About a week ago, I had gone to get my hair done. I was driving back home, and I saw a house as I was driving back home, a stately house. And what this family had done, because they have the resources to do so, was turn their house, quite frankly, into an octopus. There were tentacles, octopus tentacles, like coming out of the window and the door, and the octopus tentacles were neon, purple and green neon. So it was. Imagine looking at a house, a large stately house that looks like an octopus, right? And the American part of me thinks, oh, that's cool. But the Nigerian part of me thinks, huh, are we channeling marine spirits here? Because truly those things exist, guys. Some people are getting uncomfortable, and some people are thinking, hey, Aramide, do we want to podcast about this for anyone to hear? It is what it is, guys. Here's where it gets confusing. You come to the US and you see this thing so deeply intertwined with the culture, right? There's the costuming, there's the commercializing of Halloween, Halloween dedicated events that a city can hold, like my city held, or a company can hold, or even a church can hold. Just down the street from my house, there's a Catholic church that hosts something called a trunk or treat and wear your costumes, because for them, whatever spiritual import it had when Halloween was created, whatever even natural imports that they had, even let me say sacred imports that it had, like honoring the lives of people who had passed on, all of that has been washed away. And so now you have Christians celebrating Halloween here in the United States. And you have to ask yourself, like, are they doing something wrong? Are they going to hell in a handbasket because they're celebrating Halloween? I don't think so. Right. I do think you have to assess things, especially when it comes to like adapting things of the culture where you find yourself as a Nigerian implant to a new country. Moving here to the United States, the Nigerian community that I was exposed to treated Halloween as something to treat with disdain. Do not touch, do not look, do not interact with, don't eat the candies, because like I said, some people thought, oh, that's how you get initiated. And while I don't quite go to that extent in terms of, oh, the candy will initiate you, I do think there is something to be wise about in the sense of, what am I channeling here? What am I channeling if I'm dressing like witch XYZ or wizard XYZ, right? And one of the things that it's important I'm finding, some Nigerians, you might have accepted Halloween and it's all good for you. And if you're raising kids, it's all good for your kids. For me, I'm finding that in our family, we really have to have a clear description of what we think Halloween is and what our perspective to Halloween is and how we communicate it to our children, right? My daughter started preschool this year, but before that, we had in our home, we kind of tuned her mind that, anything that's Halloween, anything that's promoting fear, anything that's, promoting, witchcraft and walking of dead people, right? We don't touch it. So if there's a cartoon you get exposed to, right? We're not going to allow you to watch it. So it really got to the point where if she sees a pumpkin on TV, mommy, change the channel, right? But then she starts preschool. And by the way, she goes to a preschool that is a Christian preschool. However, the ethos towards Halloween there is that it's just an innocent thing. So I remember I picked her up from school one day, and I remember talking to her and how was school? What treats did you have? And she said, "Oh, I ate a cookie, and it was an orange cookie. It was an orange and black cookie." I know it's not just some plain orange and black cookie. It's orange and black because they're celebrating Halloween. Do I freak out and say, initiation? No, I don't. And to be quite frank, I don't, because, well, it's a cookie. And the other reason I don't freak out is because, well, as her parent, I know very clearly what I am speaking of over her. I'm saying over her. I know the prayers I speak over her. And so I don't necessarily freak out. But it does get confusing when we have raised her in a home where we say we don't watch Halloween, but then you go to school and you're making artwork with ghosts, right? And then many churches, even African churches, Nigerian churches here for Halloween, would have a hallelujah party or a harvest party or a trunk party, and you tell the kids, go and get your costumes. It gets confusing in your parenting, like, how do I talk about this, right? How do I even, and I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers yet. All I'm going to say is this: where I land on this topic is not to be of the suspicious side. Although the concerns that my parents and the group of parents that I grew up amongst, Nigerian parents that I grew up amongst, the concerns they had are so legitimate, right? There is such a thing as quote unquote initiation. That was my professor's story. There is such a thing as that. But at the same time, I'm the sort of parent, at least specifically with my kids, always asking questions. Well, what are you guys doing this? Where does this come from? I'm always asking questions of the people who do care for her. I'm also asking my child questions like, what did you do? What was said to you? So I bring a little bit more of practical sense and less of the suspicion to how we treat this. Here's the other thing that I want to emphasize, right? Halloween, it channels dark things. It channels the frightful things, ghosts and witches and wizards, and those things are dark. And that is a dark spiritual, but there is a bright and light spiritual. And I'm obviously speaking here from a Christian spiritual perspective. And this is actually one of the reasons why I don't fear too much with my child. You won't find me turning my home into an octopus anytime soon. However, I do know that my words over my child have authority. And so I'm speaking words over her and I'm praying over her. And those prayers, I believe, create what you call like a force field. It protects her from things as she goes out into the world. People may be celebrating Halloween and even into a world where people are legitimately into dark things and may want to initiate. I know the words that I'm speaking over my child, and I know those words are powerful. And because of that, I'm not saying I'm relaxed, but I'm not also not fearful. And this is actually something that might be important for some millennials and Gen Z with a Nigerian influence identity to hear. Oftentimes, we are raised up with a faith that leans so easily into fear and suspicion, especially as we look at older generation and the way they treat their spirituality or their faith. But I would encourage you to see things from the perspective of faith. Our Christian anyway. Faith is a power that speaks louder than anything else could speak. And that's where I stand in the sense of this. I don't know that I've articulated the language yet to share with my kids. Even in practical sense, I probably will not take my child to school on Halloween Day, but it doesn't come from a place of fear, you will be initiated. It comes more from a place of, I'm trying to educate you and inform you about spiritual things. So because of that, I'm not just going to throw you into a day at your school where the things you see are more tuned into the negative spiritual, right? Because I'm still trying to inform your mind. However, when she's in an age of maturity, middle school, high school, I'll let her go to school on Halloween because by that time, I expect to have helped her to be informed about how to view these things, how to view the supernatural world, and where Halloween sits in all of that. That's where I'm at now. Dear Nigerians, I hope that this has been an interesting conversation for you. If you stayed with me throughout the end of this episode, I thank you, and I will see you soon. Bye.